The Galactic Council had existed for over 4,000 years. 47 civilizations. 47 flags. 47 voices that shaped the fate of the known universe. They met every 10 years inside the Grand Hall of Veyron Prime, a station so massive it had its own weather system, its own gravity fields, and its own artificial sun that rose and set on a timer set by the founding species. And for 4,000 years, humanity had not been invited. Not once. Commander James Harlow sat in the rear observation deck of the U.S. Horizon, watching the stars drift past like slow, lazy sparks. He had a cup of cold coffee in his hand that he forgot to drink 3 hours ago. His uniform was pressed. His boots were clean. His eyes were tired. "Commander," said Lieutenant Yara Chun from behind him, her voice careful. "We are 40 minutes from the Council station." "I know," James said without turning around. "Sir, the diplomatic team is asking if you want to review the entry protocols again." "I've reviewed them 11 times, Yara." 12 is a lucky number. He finally turned. Yara was young, 26, maybe 27, with sharp eyes and a habit of tucking her stylus behind her ear when she was nervous. Right now, the stylus was behind her ear. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," she said honestly. He smiled for the first time in 3 days. "Good. Me too." The U.S. Horizon was not alone. Behind it, in perfect formation, were 11 more ships.
But these were not ordinary ships.
These were the ships that had kept the entire crew silent for 8 months during construction. Ships that had been built inside a classified lunar facility with no external cameras, no civilian workers, and no paper trail that any foreign intelligence, human or alien, could follow. Ships that ran on dark matter. Nobody outside of Earth's top 40 scientists and 12 military commanders knew what that truly meant. The public had theories. The aliens had suspicions. But nobody, not a single soul beyond those 52 people, knew what was sitting in those halls. James finished his cold coffee, set the cup down, and stood up. "Tell the diplomatic team to relax," he said. "We're not here to beg for a seat at the table." Yara raised an eyebrow. "Then why are we here, sir?" James picked up his jacket and walked toward the door. "We're here to build a new table." The Grand Hall of Veyron Prime was designed to intimidate. That was not an accident. The founding species, the Veyroni, had spent 200 years designing a space that would make every civilization that entered it feel small. The ceilings were 300 meters high. The walls were carved from a black mineral that absorbed light and reflected it back in cold blue tones. Every delegate sat in a chair that was slightly lower than the central podium, so that whoever stood there always looked down at everyone else. Humanity's delegation walked in quietly. There were 5 of them. James Harlow, Yara Chen, Dr. Patricia Wells, who was Earth's leading xenolinguist, Admiral George Sutton, who was the oldest and most decorated officer in Earth's fleet, and finally a young man named Marcus Reed, 23 years old, glasses, a slight stammer when he was excited, who happened to be the person who had solved dark matter propulsion 4 years ago at the age of 19. Nobody in the hall knew who Marcus was. He looked like someone's intern. The chamber fell into a murmur when they entered. High Delegate Sara of the Veyroni, tall, silver-skinned, with 4 arms folded in a gesture that translated roughly as polite contempt, looked down from the central podium and spoke in Universal Galactic, a language that had been developed specifically so all species could communicate. "The human delegation is acknowledged," Sara said. "You are permitted to observe this session. You are not permitted to speak unless addressed." Admiral Sutton, who had been in the military for 40 years and had never once been told to sit down and be quiet without pushing back, kept his face perfectly neutral. Yara translated quietly for the others, even though James already understood. "Observed," James said under his breath. "Like animals at a zoo." "That is precisely how they see us," Patricia whispered back. The session began. The council discussed trade routes in the outer belts. They discussed the territorial conflict between the Dreth and the Kalan, 2 species who had been arguing over the same 3 moons for 600 years. They discussed energy quotas, mining rights, and a new treaty regarding artificial intelligence governance. Not once did they address humanity. Not once did anyone look at the 5 humans sitting in the observer section. Marcus leaned toward James halfway through the third hour and whispered, "How long do we have to sit here?" "Until they're done feeling superior," James said quietly. "That could take a while. It already has 4,000 years. Marcus pushed his glasses up his nose and looked around the chamber. He was doing what he always did, calculating. This analysis considers angles, distances, energy signatures from the translator devices, the architecture of the ceiling, and the material density of the walls. "They built this place, so sound carries from the podium to every seat," he whispered. "But it carries the other way too. Every whisper from this section goes straight up to the ceiling and reflects back to the front row." James looked at him slowly. "You're saying they can hear us?" "Every word we've said since we sat down," Marcus confirmed, completely calm. James straightened in his chair. Patricia closed her eyes briefly. Admiral Sutton, to his enormous credit, smiled. 3 hours before the council session, an unnoticed event occurred. The U.S. horizon had dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Veyron system, exactly as protocol demanded. Every ship arriving at Veyron Prime was required to power down their long-range drives, reduce speed to sublight, and submit to a full sensor scan by the Council's Border Patrol fleet. Humanity's 12 ships complied. The Border Patrol fleet of Veyroni cruisers, sleek and silver, bristling with sensor arrays that could read the molecular composition of a ship's hull from 10,000 kilometers away, swept their beams across the human vessels. Then they swept again. Then a third time. Captain Voss of the lead Veyroni cruiser stared at his screen and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Confusion. "Run it again," he told his sensor officer. "Sir, I have run it 4 times." "Run it again." The results did not change. The human ships were registered as physically present. The hulls, mass, and crew life signs were all accounted for. But the energy signature was wrong. All wrong. Every ship in the galaxy that used any form of known propulsion left a specific energy trail. Fusion drives left one signature. Antimatter drives left another. Even the most advanced Veyroni quantum-fold engines had a recognizable pattern that sensors could identify in under 2 seconds. The human ships had no recognizable pattern. They had something. But whatever it was, it did not match anything in the Veyroni database. It did not match anything in the combined databases of all 47 Council species. It was not supposed to exist. Captain Voss sent an encrypted message to the Grand Hall immediately. High Delegate Sarah received it during the 3rd hour of the session, read it twice, and kept her face perfectly still. The message said 7 words. "We cannot identify their drive systems.
Advise."
Sarah looked across the chamber at the 5 humans sitting quietly in the observer section. The young one with the glasses was whispering something. The commander was listening. She sent back 4 words. "Do not engage. Watch." Meanwhile, back on the horizon, Lieutenant Yara Chun was watching the Border Patrol cruisers through the observation feeds. She had been watching them since they arrived. "They've run their sensors on us 6 times now," she said to the communications officer beside her. 7, the communications officer corrected. 7th sweep just completed. Yara smiled slowly. "Tell Commander Harlow," she said. The 4th hour of the council session began with a trade dispute between the Myrati and the Solon over phosphate distribution rights in the Kepler reaches. It was, by any measure, deeply boring. Marcus had fallen asleep twice and caught himself both times. Patricia was taking notes on her tablet, not about the session, but about the architectural acoustics she was quietly mapping. Admiral Sutton had not moved in 90 minutes, sitting with his hands on his knees like a statue of a patient man. And then High Delegate Sarah did something unexpected. She looked directly at the human delegation for the first time. "Commander Harlow," she said. The entire chamber went quiet. James stood slowly. "High Delegate, you arrived with 12 vessels." "We did. Our Border Patrol conducted standard entry scans. We are aware." Sarah paused. In 4,000 years of Council history, the Veyroni had never been confused by a scan reading. She was not going to admit confusion in front of 46 other species. But she needed an answer. "Your ship's propulsion systems did not register on our sensors," she said. "We would like an explanation." The chamber erupted. 46 species talking at once. Translators working overtime. The Dreth delegate, a 7-foot creature covered in dark scales, leaned forward with its neck extended in what Patricia immediately recognized as a threat display. The Kulan, their ancient enemies, leaned back in what she recognized as fear. The Myrati, small and insect-like, went completely still, which in their culture meant extreme interest. James waited for the noise to die down. It took a while. When it was quiet enough, he spoke. "Hi, Delegate Sarah," he said. "With respect, the propulsion systems on our vessels are the property of the United Earth Systems. We are not required under any council protocol to disclose proprietary technology. Particularly," he added carefully, "to a body that has never formally recognized humanity as a member species." Another eruption. Sarah held up one of her forehands, and the chamber fell silent again. That was the power she carried. A single gesture and 46 species stopped talking. "You are an observer species," she said. "You have no seat, no vote, and no standing to invoke protocol on your own behalf." "That's correct," James agreed pleasantly. "Which means we're also not bound by council regulations regarding technology disclosure." Silence. Complete, total silence. Admiral Sutton allowed himself the smallest possible smile. Marcus pushed his glasses up. Sarah studied James for a long moment. "What is it that you want, Commander Harlow?" she finally asked. James clasped his hands behind his back. "Membership," he said. "Full membership. 1 seat, 1 vote, equal standing with every other species in this room. And if we decline? Then we go home," James said simply. "And we take our technology with us. All of it." The recess lasted 4 hours. That was unprecedented. Council recesses were typically 30 minutes, long enough for delegates to consult their home governments via quantum link and return with instructions. 4 hours meant something was deeply wrong with the normal order of things. James used the time to call the horizon. "Status?" he asked. "Quiet," Yara said over the comm. "The Veroni border cruisers moved to a wider orbit about 20 minutes ago. Still watching us, but from further back. They're nervous." "Very." The Dreth sent a tight beam transmission to their home system about an hour ago. "Encrypted. We caught the carrier wave, but not the content. They're reporting back," James said. "Good. Let them talk." He cut the comm and turned to find Marcus sitting on the floor of the waiting corridor, back against the wall, his tablet on his knees, working. "You should rest," James said. "I'm fine. I'm thinking." "About what?" Marcus looked up. "About whether we made the right call bringing all 12 ships. I keep running the probability models, and I think there's about a 32% chance that showing up with that much firepower triggers a defensive response from the Dreth before the session resumes." James crouched down to his level. "And the other 68%? They're too scared to do anything stupid." "I'll take 68%, James said. Marcus nodded slowly. He had the look he always got when his brain was running faster than his ability to speak, a kind of distant focus, like he was watching something only he could see. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "Go ahead. Did you actually expect them to say yes to membership today?" James was quiet for a moment.
"No."
"Then why ask?" "Because now they know we're willing to ask," James said. "And now they have to decide what refusing us costs them." Marcus thought about that. "You're using the ships as leverage, not as weapons. That's the only way the deal works without a war." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The dark matter drives, I need to tell you something about them that I haven't told anyone." James went still. "What?" Marcus set his tablet down and looked up at the ceiling. "When I finished the propulsion model," he said, "I realized the drives don't just move the ships. When they're running at full capacity, all 12 together in close formation, they generate a field. This field is known as a dark matter resonance field. It's completely passive. It doesn't do anything offensive." "But," James said, "but inside that field, no other drive system in the galaxy works," Marcus said quietly. "Any ship caught inside the field when we run all 12 drives together, their engines go completely dark. They stop. They can't maneuver. They can't run." James stared at him. "You've known this for how long?" he asked. Since last Tuesday, Marcus said. I ran the final numbers on the trip out here. Marcus. I know. You should have told me immediately. I know. Marcus picked his tablet back up. But I needed to be sure first. And now I am. James stood. He walked 3 steps down the corridor, stopped, and turned back. Does anyone else know? Just you, Marcus said. HFY, from now on, it stays between us until we need it. The recess ended not with the council reconvening, but with an alarm. It was a soft alarm, not the screaming red kind, but the kind that made trained military people go very still and hushed. It came through James's personal comm unit at a frequency reserved for fleet emergencies only. He stepped away from the delegation and answered it. Harlow. Sir, it's Yara. The Dreth battle group just dropped out of fold space at the edge of the system. James kept his voice even. How many ships? 14. Sir, they're Dreth Warchief class. That's their heaviest line. Are they moving toward us? Not yet. They're holding at the system boundary. But they're not running passive sensors. They've got active targeting arrays up. James turned and looked back at the corridor where Marcus was still sitting on the floor with his tablet. Yara, he said quietly, go to full power on all drives, but do not, repeat, do not, bring weapons online. Sir, they want us to bring weapons online. They want us to look threatening.
Don't give them that.
Just power the drives. A pause. Yes, sir. James walked back to Marcus. The Dreth brought a battle group, he said. Marcus did not look up from his tablet immediately. Then he did. 14 ships, he said. You knew. I ran the probability model of what they'd do if membership was proposed today. 14 ships at the system edge was the most likely outcome. He paused. Sir, if they move inside 800,000 kilometers, they enter the resonance field radius when we run all 12 drives. I'm aware. It might be time to tell Admiral Sutton. James looked down the corridor. The Admiral was standing at the far end, speaking quietly with Patricia. He had the posture of a man who had already guessed most of what was happening. He already knows something's wrong, James said. He's been in combat his whole life. He can read a room. James walked toward him. Admiral Sutton turned before James even called his name. Battle group at the edge of the system? Sutton asked. 14 Warchief class, James confirmed. Sutton nodded slowly. He was 64 years old, with white hair and the kind of calm that only comes from having been genuinely terrified enough times that it no longer registers the same way. What do you want to do? Sutton asked. I want to go back into that chamber, James said. And I want to make a second proposal. Sutton raised his eyebrows. What kind of proposal? The kind that makes them realize the Dreth aren't just a problem for us, James said. They're a problem for everyone in that room. Sutton was quiet for a moment. You're going to use the Dreth against the Dreth, he said. Caro, James said.
Exactly that.
When the council reconvened, James did not wait to be addressed. He stood up from the observer section before High Delegate Sarah could even open the session formally. That alone sent a ripple through the chamber. Observers did not stand uninvited. It simply was not done. High Delegate, James said, loudly enough for the acoustics of the chamber to carry his voice to every seat. With respect, before this session continues, the Council should be aware that a Dreth battle group of 14 Warchief-class vessels dropped out of fold space at the edge of the Veyron system approximately 9 minutes ago. They have active targeting arrays deployed. The chamber did not erupt this time. It froze. Every head turned toward the Dreth delegate, a massive creature named Grothkar, 7 feet of dark scales and military posture, who had been sitting in absolute stillness since James first spoke. Grothkar did not move, did not speak, did not deny it. That silence was louder than anything he could have said. High Delegate Sarah looked at Grothkar for a long, terrible moment. Then she looked back at James. You are claiming the Dreth have brought unauthorized military force into Council space? She said. I'm not claiming anything, James said. I'm reporting sensor data. Your own border patrol can confirm it. Sarah sent a rapid command to her aide. The aide checked. The aide nodded. The Mayority delegate, small, still, intensely focused, made a sound in its own language that the translator rendered as, "This is a declaration of intent." The Solan delegate, a tall blue-gray species known for diplomatic caution, stood and said formally, "The Solan collective requests an immediate explanation from the Dreth delegation." Hrothgar finally moved. "The Dreth Dominion takes precautionary positions when unknown military technology enters council space," he said. His voice was deep and slow, like boulders grinding. "The human vessels represent an unclassified threat. We protect the council." "You deployed a battle group without notification or council authorization," Sara said. Her voice was still flat, but there was something sharp underneath it now. "Precautionary," Hrothgar repeated. 14 Warship-class vessels is not a precaution, said the Kalan delegate, the Dreth's ancient rival, in a voice dripping with satisfaction at finally having a legitimate reason to attack them publicly. "That is a fleet action." The chamber split. 12 species sided immediately with the Dreth, mostly the ones who had long-standing military alliances with them. 11 sided with Sara's demand for an explanation. The remaining 24 went quiet, watching, measuring. And through all of it, James stood calmly in the observer section. Yara leaned toward him. "You knew this would happen." "I hoped," James said quietly. "There's a difference. What happens if they decide to let the Dreth keep the battle group in place?" James glanced at Marcus, who was watching the chamber split with his tablet open, running numbers quietly. "Then we find out what 68% looks like," James said. It was Patricia who had the idea. She had been watching the chamber fracture. 12 species with the Dreth, 11 with Sara, 24 staying silent, and she was running the same kind of calculations that Marcus ran, except hers were social. Linguistic. Political. She leaned close to James. "The 24 silent ones," she whispered. "That's your audience. Not Sara. Not Hrothgar. Those 24 species are deciding right now who they trust." James looked at her. "And how do we make them trust us?" "You don't," Patricia said. "Marcus does." James looked at Marcus, who was still looking at his tablet. "Marcus," James said. Marcus looked up. "How comfortable are you speaking in front of 47 alien species?" Marcus blinked. "Define comfortable." "On a scale of 1 to 10. -4, Marcus said immediately. "That's honest," Admiral Sutton said from behind them. "Patricia thinks you should speak," James said. "Not me. Not the Admiral. You." Marcus looked at Patricia. "Why me?" "Because you look like nobody," Patricia said quietly. "You look young. You look nervous. You look like someone who does not have a political agenda. Those 24 species have been watching soldiers and diplomats their entire existence. They've never seen a scientist stand up." Marcus thought about that. "What do I say?" he asked. "The truth," Patricia said. "All of it. What you built. How it works. What the resonance field does." James looked at her sharply. "That's classified." "James," Patricia said, using his first name, which she only did when she was completely serious. "We did not come here to negotiate from behind secrets. We came here to change how this council sees humanity. You cannot do that while hiding the most important thing we have." A long silence. Admiral Sutton cleared his throat quietly. "She's right, son." James looked at Marcus. Marcus set his tablet down, took his glasses off, cleaned them on his jacket, and put them back on. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay. HFY and HFY. Let me handle this." He stood up. He walked to the central aisle of the observer section. He raised his hand, a human gesture that meant nothing to 46 alien species, but Sara recognized it as a request to speak. She stared at him for a moment. "The junior member of the human delegation wishes to address the council?" she said. "Yes," Marcus said. His voice only cracked slightly. Hrothgar made a sound that the translator rendered as contempt. Sara, to her credit, gave a small nod. "You may approach the secondary speaking floor." Marcus walked to the low secondary platform, the one designed for observers, 3 steps below the main floor, so that even when you spoke you were still looking up at everyone else. He stood there for a moment, looking up at 47 species that were looking down at him. "My name is Marcus Reed," he said. I'm 23 years old. 4 years ago, I was 19, and I was sitting in a university library on Earth at 2 in the morning, trying to solve a propulsion problem that my professors told me was mathematically impossible. The chamber was completely silent. I solved it, he said. It took me 11 months. And what I found was not just a faster engine. What I found changes what is physically possible for every species in this galaxy. He looked up at Grothkar directly. Including yours, he said. Marcus talked for 40 minutes. He used the holographic display built into the secondary speaking floor, a system designed for observer species to present data, rarely ever used, and he filled it with equations, drive schematics, resonance field models, and energy output graphs. He did not simplify. He did not talk down. He communicated in the language of physics, and the universal translator tirelessly translated it into 47 distinct frameworks of understanding. The Myrati delegate, the insect-like species that had stayed completely still since the Dreth battle group news, began making rapid clicking sounds at the 20-minute mark. The translator struggled for a moment, then produced, "This is correct. This is mathematically correct. How did they?" And then the clicking stopped, as if the delegate caught themselves reacting out loud. The Solon delegate had called up their calculation devices and was running independent verification. Even 3 of the 12 Prodreth species were now watching Marcus, with something apart from hostility. When Marcus finished, the chamber was completely still for almost 30 seconds. Then High Delegate Sara spoke. "You're describing a propulsion system that also functions as a weapons-grade field generator," she said carefully. "No," Marcus said. "I'm describing a propulsion system that has a passive secondary effect. The resonance field is not targeted. It cannot be aimed. It affects everything within the radius equally. It is not a weapon because it cannot be used as one without disabling our ships too. But it disables all other drives in the field," Sara pressed. "Within approximately 800,000 kilometers of the formation center, yes," Marcus said. "At full power, which we have never activated. We do not intend to activate this. Unless every ship in that field, including ours, goes dark, the physics don't work." "You would disable your fleet to disable others," said the Kalan delegate slowly. "We would disable our fleet to stop a war," Marcus said. "If it came to that, yes." Silence. "That is not how military technology works," Grothkar said. "No species builds a weapon that hurts themselves." "We didn't build a weapon," Marcus said, and he looked directly at Grothkar with the calmness of someone who had spent 4 years living inside this math and knew every corner of it. "We built a drive. The field is a side effect that we discovered 11 days ago. We are telling you about it right now, in front of everyone in this room, because the alternative is you finding out about it the hard way.
And we don't want that."
Another long silence. James, watching from the observer seats, felt something shift in the chamber. He could not name it exactly. Patricia could. She leaned over and whispered to him. "Trust," she said quietly. "That just happened." The shift was real, but it was fragile, and Grothkar knew it. The Dreth delegate rose to his full height, 7 feet of ancient, scaled military culture that had been dominant in the outer arm of the galaxy for 1100 years. When Grothkar stood in a chamber, people felt it. "The human admits their technology is uncontrolled," Grothkar said. "An uncontrolled field weapon in the hands of an unvetted species is a threat to every member of this council. This is precisely why humanity has not been invited to join. They are young. They are reckless. And now they have walked into this chamber with 12 ships carrying a capability they themselves only discovered 11 days ago." He let that hang in the air. "What does that tell you about their judgment?" It was a compelling argument. James knew it was a valid argument. Several of the previously wavering species were nodding. Patricia was already calculating the response before anyone else. But it was Admiral Sutton who stood up. Everyone looked at him, the old, white-haired, 64-year-old man with 40 years of medals he'd chosen not to wear today. "High Delegate," Sutton said. "May I speak?" Sara looked at him for a moment. "You may." Sutton did not go to the speaking floor. He spoke from where he stood, in the observer section, which was technically a breach of protocol that everyone in the room noticed, and nobody stopped. "I have been in the military for 40 years, he said. I have fought in 3 wars. I have given orders that resulted in people dying. And I have spent the last decade of my career doing one thing, making sure humanity never has to fight another war again. He looked at Grothkar steadily. The Dreth delegate asks what it says about our judgment that we walked in here with technology we fully understand but whose secondary properties we discovered 11 days ago. I'll tell you what it says. It says we came here anyway. We could have waited. We could have spent 2 more years running tests, building dossiers, and calculating every advantage.
We chose not to. We chose to come now.
With what we have. And tell you everything.
He paused.
What does it say about the Dreth's judgment, he continued quietly, that their response to an unarmed delegation seeking diplomatic recognition was to park 14 warships at the edge of the system? The chamber was absolutely still. Grothkar's scales shifted, a physical tell that Patricia had read about in xenobiology briefings. In Dreth physiology, it was involuntary. It meant anger. But underneath anger, she knew, it also meant something else. It meant the argument had landed. The Dreth battle group will not stand down on the word of a human soldier, Grothkar said. No, Sutton agreed, pleasantly. But they might stand down on the word of 47 council votes. He sat back down. The vote took 6 hours to happen. In between, there were arguments, counterproposals, procedural objections, and one 40-minute break, during which the Dreth delegation went completely silent and presumably communicated with their battle group at the system edge. James spent most of that time on comms with Yara, monitoring the Dreth fleet's position. They had not moved closer, but they had not moved back. At the 5-hour mark, something unexpected happened. The Myrati delegate, who had said almost nothing during the entire session beyond that involuntary clicking at Marcus's presentation, formally requested the floor. High Delegate Sara granted it. The Myrati delegate was small enough that standing at the main podium required a raised platform, which was produced by an aide with practiced efficiency. The delegate stood, clicked 3 times in what the translator identified as a formal opening address, and then spoke in Universal Galactic. The Myrati Collective has reviewed the human propulsion data independently, the delegate said. The mathematics are correct. The resonance field is real. And the humans' claim that it cannot be weaponized without self-disabling is also correct. Murmurs. We are further prepared to state, the delegate continued, that this technology, in its current form, is defensive by nature. A species with this propulsion system could stop any fleet action, including one directed at them, by activating the field and removing all drive capability from the combat zone, including their own. This is not aggression. This is the physical equivalent of throwing yourself in front of a door to prevent it from opening. More murmurs. Louder. The Myrati Collective, the delegate concluded, will vote in favor of human membership. James exhaled slowly. Patricia reached over and quietly gripped his arm for just a moment. Marcus, sitting beside him, was completely still, staring straight ahead, and James could see his jaw was working, the way it did when he was processing something too big for words. The Solon delegate voted yes. The Kalan, delighted to oppose the Dreth in any forum, voted yes loudly. 11 of the 24 previously silent species voted yes. 6 voted no. 7 abstained. The pro-Dreth bloc unanimously voted against the proposal. When the count was finished, Sara looked at the numbers for a long moment. 29 yes. 12 no. 6 abstain. In 4,000 years of Galactic Council history, a new species had never been admitted by a majority vote in a single session. The vote passes, Sara said. Her voice was perfectly even. But James, who had been watching her face for 2 days now, saw it. The smallest thing. Barely there, gone in half a second. He was almost certain it was respect. The corridor outside the Grand Hall was empty. Everyone else was still inside, aides filing the formal admission documents, delegates sending messages home, and the Dreth battle group being formally ordered to withdraw by a council resolution that passed 26-11. James stood in the corridor alone for a few minutes. Then Yara's voice came through his comm.
Sir.
The Dreth fleet is moving. Toward us or away? Away. They're being phased out of the system.
Good.
Sir. The Horizon's crew is asking, if we can celebrate." James laughed. It came out a little rough, like something that had been sitting in his chest for a while.
"Tell them yes," he said.
"Tell them they've earned it." He cut the comm. Marcus appeared at the end of the corridor, walking slowly, hands in his jacket pockets, glasses slightly crooked. He stopped next to James, and they both leaned against the wall, looking at nothing in particular. 29-12, Marcus said.
"Yeah."
"I thought it was going to be closer." "Me too." Silence. "I keep thinking about the resonance field," Marcus said quietly. "I didn't know we had been flying these ships for 8 months until 11 days ago. What else don't I know? What else is in the math that I haven't found yet?" "That's the right question," James said. "It scares me."
"Good."
"The day it stops scaring you is the day it becomes dangerous." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We're really in now, aren't we? The Council. It's real." "It's real," James said. "Everything changes." "Everything changes," James agreed. From inside the chamber, they could hear the formal session resuming, the procedural work of actually documenting humanity's admission, reading the charter language, and registering Earth's coordinates as an official member system. Patricia was in there. Sutton was in there. History was being typed up by aides on Veron Prime while James and Marcus stood in a corridor that smelled faintly of ozone and cold recycled air. "Marcus," James said. "Yeah." "When you were standing on that secondary floor, looking up at 47 species, what were you thinking?" Marcus considered the question seriously, just as he did everything else. "I was thinking about my mom," he said. "She's a high school physics teacher in Ohio. She used to put a quote on her classroom wall every year. Different one each year. When I was in 9th grade, the quote was, 'The universe is not required to make sense to you.'" James nodded. "I was thinking," Marcus said, "that I wish I could tell her that we made it make a little more sense today." James was quiet. Then he said, "Write her a letter when we get back." "Yeah," Marcus said. "I will." Yara appeared at the far end of the corridor, walking toward them with her stylus tucked behind her ear and a look on her face that meant she had 17 things to report and was trying to decide which one to lead with. "Ambassador Harlow," she said. James looked at her. "What did you call me?" "Sarah's aide just filed the formal title assignments," Yara said. "As senior delegate, you've been classified as Earth's first official ambassador to the Galactic Council." She paused. "Sir." James looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back at him. "SYMJHY," James said quietly. "From now on is the same." And above the station, where the artificial sun of Veron Prime was beginning its slow-programmed descent toward the horizon, 12 dark matter ships held their formation in the dark, quiet, still, and carrying inside their hulls a math that nobody in the galaxy had ever dreamed was possible. Until a 19-year-old in a university library decided the impossible was just a problem nobody had stayed up late enough to solve.
The end.